The air inside the Accord chamber tasted of ozone and dying flowers. Specifically, it tasted of Verath blossoms, which the Galtharian diplomatic corps had threaded through the ceiling lattice in observance of the bonding Accord's sacred protocol. The blossoms were white, fist-sized, and they released a chemical compound upon wilting that was supposed to promote clarity of thought and openness of spirit. In practice, they released a smell like burnt sugar and old copper, and after 6 hours of sitting beneath them, Princess Thalira Savan of the third sovereign house of Galthara could feel the taste coating her teeth. 72 hours remained on the Accord clock. She sat at the far end of a negotiation table carved from a single slab of polished obsidian, its surface reflecting the light from suspended plasma lanterns in ripples of blue and gold. Her hands were folded precisely in her lap, the way her mother had taught her before her mother had died, the way the protocol regent had drilled into her since childhood. Composed, still, regal, her spine did not touch the back of the chair. Her eyes, large and dark amber with vertical pupils, tracked the movement of the chamber without her head turning. The bonding accord of the third house stated this. Upon the death or abdication of the reigning sovereign, the eldest unmarried daughter of the bloodline had exactly 120 hours to accept a formal bond contract from a registered suitor of the approved lineage. If the deadline expired without a sealed contract, the daughter was declared unbonded, the third house's charter was dissolved, and its territories reverted to the Grand Conclave for redistribution. 5 days. That was what the architects of the Accord had decided a dynasty was worth. 5 days to find a husband or lose everything. Thalira's father, Sovereign Rael Savan, had died 11 days ago. The Accord clock should have started immediately. But the protocol regent, a gaunt Galtharian male named Drelas Vorn, had filed a procedural challenge on the grounds that the death had occurred during a transit eclipse, which technically suspended all civic clocks for the duration of the celestial event. The Grand Conclave had debated the challenge for 6 days before ruling against it. The clock had started 48 hours ago. 72 hours remained, and she had no suitor she would accept. The chamber doors opened, and 3 more entered. Thalira's skin, a deep teal with undertones of midnight blue that shifted as she breathed, tightened across her knuckles where her hands pressed together. Her pointed ears, sharp and angled beneath hair the color of black copper, caught the sound of their boots on the stone floor before she saw them. Lord Korith Sale, Warlord Davin Trest, Emissary Bryn of the Vathari Compact. 3 registered suitors, 3 males of approved lineage, 3 contracts she had already refused. Lord Korith entered first, moving with the deliberate grace of someone who believed the room existed to frame him. He was tall even by Galtharian standards, his pale silver skin unmarked by labor or war, his eyes a cold, polished jade. He wore formal bonding attire, deep burgundy silk with gold thread at the collar and wrists, cut to emphasize the breadth of his shoulders. He smiled at Thalira as he took his seat, and the smile was the kind that expected to be returned and resented its absence. Warlord Davin was his opposite, broad, scarred, dressed in military formals with campaign ribbons across his chest. His skin was dark granite, nearly black in the chamber's plasma light, and his movements had the economy of someone accustomed to violence. He did not smile. He sat and placed both hands flat on the table, as if establishing territorial claim on the obsidian itself. Emissary Bryn was neither warrior nor aristocrat. He was slight, precise, and his bonding offer was backed by the Vathari Compact's trade fleet, which made him the wealthiest candidate in the chamber and the most dangerous. His eyes never quite met anyone else's. They moved across surfaces, calculating distances and angles, and Thalira had learned in previous sessions that he spoke to her the way a merchant appraised cargo. Protocol Regent Drelas, Vorn stood at the head of the table and opened the session. The Accord clock registers 72 hours, 14 minutes. The third sovereign house presents Princess Thalira Savan, unbonded. 3 registered suitors are present. Princess, will you hear their renewed terms? I will hear them, Thalira said. Her voice was steady, her stomach turned. Lord Korith spoke first. His terms had not changed. He offered his house's military alliance, a merger of territorial holdings, and the expectation that Thalira would relocate to his estate on the northern continent and bear heirs within 2 cycles. He delivered this as though he were offering a gift. The phrase he used was elevation of your station, which implied her current station needed elevating, which was precisely the kind of insult that a Korith male delivered without realizing it was an insult. Warlord Davin's terms were simpler: military protection, territorial absorption. She would retain her title but surrender operational command of the Third House's border defenses. He wanted her soldiers. Everything else was decoration. Emissary Bryn's offer was the most elegant and the most suffocating: trade fleet integration, financial stabilization. A bonding contract drafted by Vathari legal architects that ran 47 pages and included clauses governing her daily schedule, her public appearances, her dietary regimen, and the genetic screening protocols for any offspring. Bryn presented it as comprehensive care. Thalira read it as ownership with footnotes. She refused all 3, again. Lord Korith's jaw tightened. Princess, the clock does not negotiate. Nor do I, Lord Korith. You understand what happens at 0, Davin said. Not a question. I have read the accord. Then you are choosing the dissolution of your house, Bryn said, his voice mild, his eyes calculating. Thalira looked at him. Her amber eyes held steady, and something in their vertical pupils contracted. I am choosing to exercise the 72 hours that remain to me. Unless the accord has been amended since this morning, that is still my right. Drella's Vorn cleared his throat. The accord stands as written. The princess may continue to receive suitors until the clock expires. This session is adjourned. The 3 suitors left. Korith paused at the door to look back at her with an expression that suggested he was storing her refusal somewhere he could reach it later. Davin walked out without acknowledgement. Bryn paused, adjusted his cuffs, and said, 67 hours is a long time to spend alone, Princess, before the door closed behind him. Thalira sat in the empty chamber and pressed her fingertips against the obsidian table until the cold bit through her skin. The Verath blossoms above her were browning at their edges. The ozone taste was stronger. 67 hours. She had 67 hours to find a suitor she could live beside without surrendering every piece of herself that mattered, or lose the house her mother had built and her father had held and her younger sisters depended on. 3 sisters, all underage, all sheltered in the house's residential wing, all trusting that their eldest sister would keep the roof from collapsing. She closed her eyes. When she opened them, the plasma lanterns had shifted from blue-gold to amber, signaling the transition to the second watch. Drella's Vorn entered through the side passage. He moved quietly for a tall male, and his expression was the careful neutral of a man carrying news he did not want to deliver. There is a 4th suitor, he said. Thalira looked at him. From where? The diplomatic annex. He arrived this morning on a maintenance transport. He is human. The word landed in the chamber like a stone dropped in still water. Human. The approved lineage registry did not include humans, had never included humans. Humans were categorized as service-class labor partners under the Grand Conclave species classification, permitted on Galtharian soil for contracted work, excluded from civic participation, ineligible for bonding contracts with any house above the 7th tier. The third sovereign house was Tier 1. That is not possible, Thalira said. And yet, Drella's placed a data tablet on the obsidian table. He filed the petition 40 minutes ago. He cited Accord Statute 11, Clause 4, Any individual of sound mind and body who presents themselves at the Accord Chamber during the open window may petition for suitor registration, provided no existing statute explicitly bars their species by name from the approved lineage. He is correct, Princess. The registry lists lineage requirements by Galtharian house and tier. It specifies approved bloodlines. It does not, anywhere in its 700 pages, mention humans, because when the Accord was drafted 9 centuries ago, the drafters did not know humans existed. Thalira stared at the tablet. The petition was sparse. A name, Cole Mercer. A species designation, human Earth origin. A current posting, maintenance contractor, Galtharian diplomatic annex, sublevel 3. A single line of stated intent, I wish to be considered. Sublevel 3, Thalira said. He is a maintenance worker. A pipe fitter, to be precise. He has been repairing the annex's water reclamation systems for the past 4 months. And he wishes to marry a Tier 1 princess. He wishes to be considered. Those were his words. Thalira leaned back in her chair for the first time that day. Her spine touched the wood and she did not correct her posture. She read the petition again. I wish to be considered. Not I demand an audience. Not I offer terms. 5 words that asked for nothing except the chance to be seen. The conclave will challenge it, she said. They already have. Lord Korith filed an objection before the petition's ink was dry. The conclave is reviewing it now. But the statute is clear and Korith's objection is procedural, not substantive. Unless they can find a species bar in the registry, the human's petition stands. Show him in. Drellas hesitated. Princess, I would advise caution. A human pipe fitter in the Accord Chamber will be interpreted as a political provocation. Show him in, Drellas. Cole Mercer entered the Accord Chamber the way a man enters a room when he knows he doesn't belong in it, but has decided to stand there anyway. He was not tall. By Galtharian standards, he was compact, 5'11" in a species that averaged 7 feet. His hair was dark brown, cut short, streaked with early gray at the temples. His face was weathered in the way of someone who had spent years working in environments that did not care about his comfort. Deep lines at the corners of his eyes, a jaw that had been broken at least once, light stubble that was 3 days past regulation. His hands were scarred across the knuckles and stained with the faint chemical residue of pipe sealant that never fully washed out. He wore his work clothes, not formal bonding attire, not even civilian dress, dark gray maintenance coveralls with a utility belt and a name patch on the left breast that read Mercer in block letters. He had cleaned them, she could see that much. The fabric was pressed. The boots were scrubbed. But they were still coveralls, and the contrast between his attire and the obsidian chamber, the plasma lanterns, the wilting Verath blossoms, was absolute. He stopped at the foot of the table and looked at her. Thalira had been looked at by powerful males for 3 days. Korith's gaze appraised her like an acquisition. Davin's measured her like terrain. Bryn's catalogued her like inventory. Cole Mercer looked at her the way a man looks at someone when he actually sees them, and the difference hit her like a change in atmospheric pressure. Princess Savon, he said. His voice was quiet, steady, unpolished. He did not bow. Among humans, she understood, the custom was different. He inclined his head slightly, which was acknowledgement without submission. Mr. Mercer, she gestured to the chair across from her, sit. He sat. His hands rested on his knees, not on the table. He did not spread himself across the space the way the other suitors had. You filed a bonding petition, Thalira said. Yes. You are a pipe fitter. Water reclamation specialist, but pipe fitter is close enough. The Third Sovereign House controls 9 planetary systems, a defense fleet of 42 warships, and trade agreements with the 6 largest Galtharian merchant conglomerates. What does a water reclamation specialist bring to that table? Cole Mercer was quiet for a moment, not the silence of someone searching for words, the silence of someone choosing which ones mattered. "Clean water," he said. Thalira felt something shift behind her sternum. It was small and involuntary, and she suppressed it before it reached her face. "That is not an answer to the question I asked. It's the only honest one I have. I don't have a fleet. I don't have a territory. I don't have a bloodline that your registry would recognize. But I've been on sub-level 3 for 4 months, and in that time I've fixed 6 critical failures in the Annex's water system that your Galtharian Engineering Corps had been deferring for 2 years. One of them would have contaminated the drinking supply for the entire diplomatic quarter within a month. I filed reports. Nobody read them. I fixed the problems anyway, because people were going to drink that water. Altruism is not a bonding qualification." "No," Cole agreed. "But it's a reason I showed up." "Why did you show up, Mr. Mercer?" He looked at her steadily. His eyes were brown, unremarkable by any standard except the directness of their focus. "Because I heard about the accord, and I read the terms the other 3 offered you. They're posted in the diplomatic annex foyer for public record, and every one of those contracts treats you like a thing to be acquired. Korath wants a trophy. Davin wants an army. Bryn wants a portfolio. None of them asked what you want." The chamber was quiet. The Verath blossoms released another wave of burnt sugar, and Thalira breathed through it. "What I want is irrelevant to the accord." "Is it?" "The accord requires a sealed contract with a registered suitor. It does not require affection. It does not require compatibility. It requires a signature." "Then why haven't you signed?" The question landed precisely where it was aimed, and Thalira's composure held by the width of a fingernail. Because the answer was the thing she had not said aloud in 72 hours of negotiations. Because the answer was the reason she sat alone in a chamber full of dying flowers while the clock counted down toward the end of everything her family had built. "Because I will not sell my house to save it," she said. The words came out quieter than she intended. Cole nodded, not the nod of someone who understood politically. The nod of someone who understood personally, the way a person nods when they recognize the shape of a choice they have faced in their own life, in smaller rooms, with smaller stakes. "Then don't," he said. "Let me file the petition. Let the conclave argue about whether a human can be on the registry. That argument alone buys you time. And if they can't find a statute to bar me, then you have a 4th option on the table that doesn't come with a 47-page ownership manual." "You read Bryn's contract." "It was in the foyer. I read all 3. Bryn's took the longest. The dietary clause alone was 4 pages. Nobody should need 4 pages to tell someone what they're allowed to eat." Thalira studied him. Her amber eyes moved across his face the way a cartographer maps unfamiliar terrain. The broken jaw, the chemical stains on his hands, the early gray, the steadiness. He was not handsome by any standard she had been taught to recognize. He was not impressive. He sat in her accord chamber in maintenance coveralls and offered clean water as a qualification, and something about the fundamental absurdity and the fundamental decency of the gesture made her chest ache in a way she did not have a word for in any of the 4 languages she spoke. "The conclave will reject your petition," she said. "Probably. Lord Korath will use it to claim I have compromised the accord's dignity." "Also probably. And if your petition survives the challenge, what terms would you offer?" Cole leaned forward slightly. "I don't have terms. I have a question. What do you need to keep your house intact and your sisters safe, and how can I help with that without asking you to become someone you're not?" The accord clock displayed 64 hours. Thalira dismissed him, not because she wanted to, but because the protocol regent was already at the side passage, with an expression that said the conclave's preliminary ruling was in, and whatever it said would reshape the next 64 hours. She watched Cole Mercer stand, incline his head again, and walked back through the chamber doors in his clean-pressed coveralls with the chemical-stained hands, and she noticed that he walked the same way going out as he had coming in, like a man who knew exactly what he was and did not apologize for it. The conclave's ruling arrived on Drella's Vorn's tablet before Mercer's footsteps had faded. Petition stands. Statute 11, Clause 4 contains no species bar. The registry is silent on humans. The human is provisionally registered as a fourth suitor pending formal hearing at the 48-hour mark. Drella's read it aloud in a voice that suggested the words tasted worse than the Verath blossoms. Thalira read it on the tablet and felt something she had not felt in 11 days. Options. Not good ones, not safe ones, but options where before there had been only walls. She looked at the Accord clock. Its digits glowed on the obsidian table's edge in soft amber light, a countdown built into the table's surface by artisans who had understood that urgency was best communicated through beauty. 64 hours. She had entered this chamber 3 days ago as the grieving eldest daughter of a dead sovereign, carrying the weight of 3 younger sisters and 9 planetary systems and 7 centuries of institutional expectation. And in that time, 3 lords of approved lineage had offered her everything she needed and nothing she could bear. Now a pipe fitter from sub-level 3 had walked into the chamber in maintenance coveralls and given her the only thing none of them had thought to provide, a question that treated her like a person who might have an answer. She pressed her palms to the obsidian table. The surface was cold, dense, ancient. Under her fingers, the stone felt like the house itself, solid, enduring, built to outlast the people who stood on it. She opened her personal terminal and pulled Cole Mercer's personnel file from the Annex database. Not the petition, the file. She read it the way she read structural assessments, looking for load-bearing facts. Cole Mercer, age 38, Earth-born, city called Denver, a mountain settlement on the 3rd planet of the Sol system. Career, 21 years in water infrastructure. Stations served. Orbital platform Kessler 7 decommissioned. The Herath mining colony, the Relari trade corridor, way station Pell, and now the Galtharian diplomatic annex. Performance reviews. Uniformly positive in technical competence. Uniformly noted for what one supervisor called an inability to leave broken things broken even when instructed to defer. Disciplinary record. 2 citations for unauthorized repairs. Both citations noted that the unauthorized repairs had prevented system failures that would have affected civilian populations. She read the citations twice. Unauthorized repair of filtration bypass, Sub-Level 3, Galtharian Diplomatic Annex, Month 2 of contract. Unauthorized repair of structural mount, Junction 9, Way Station Pell, Year 3. Both times the same pattern. He saw something broken, reported it through channels, watched the report disappear into bureaucracy, and fixed it anyway because waiting meant someone would get hurt. There was a note at the bottom of the Way Station Pell citation. It read, Specialist Mercer was reprimanded for the repair. The repair prevented a decompression event that would have killed 43 station residents. The reprimand stands. The residents are alive. Thalira closed the file. She stared at the Accord clock for a long time. Then she called for Drella's. I want to see Sub-Level 3. Drella's raised an eyebrow but said nothing. He had served the 3rd house long enough to know when a Savan was gathering intelligence, not making a decision. The maintenance levels of the diplomatic annex were not designed for royal visits. The corridors were narrow, lined with exposed conduit and labeled junction boxes, lit by overhead fluorescent panels that hummed at a frequency Thalira could feel in her teeth. The air smelled of recycled water and machine oil. Workers in maintenance coveralls moved past her with startled expressions that quickly became careful non-expressions when they recognized the teal skin and amber eyes of a Tier 1 princess walking their corridors in court attire. She found Cole Mercer's workspace by following the sound of a torque wrench. The workshop door was open. Inside, he was bent over a section of exposed pipe, adjusting a coupling with the focused attention of someone doing the only thing that mattered. He did not see her for a moment, and in that moment she watched him work. His hands moved with the economy of long practice. His face carried the particular concentration of a man who understood the thing beneath his hands at a fundamental level. Not just the mechanics, but the purpose, the consequence, the people who would drink this water or breathe this air or feel this temperature because he had done the job correctly. She had seen the same expression on her father's face when he reviewed military logistics. Not ambition, not performance, custodianship. He looked up. He did not startle. "Princess," he set the wrench down. He did not wipe his hands before acknowledging her. He wiped them after, which told her that the acknowledgement mattered more than the presentation. "Show me what you fixed," she said. He did. He walked her through Sub-Level 3's water infrastructure with the clarity of someone who could explain complexity to anyone who cared to listen. He showed her the filtration bypass he had repaired, the corroded junction he had replaced, the pressure regulator he had recalibrated after discovering it was dumping excess flow into a waste drain instead of cycling it back through the reclamation loop. He explained each fix without condescension and without apology. Here was a problem. Here was what he did. Here was why it mattered. At the sixth repair, a water main coupling that had been leaking into the wall cavity for months before he sealed it, Thalira touched the pipe. The metal was warm. The seal was clean. "How did you know this was leaking?" she asked. "It was inside the wall." The wall was damp. You could feel it if you put your hand flat on the panel. The condensation pattern was wrong. Nobody touches these walls, but I check the things nobody checks because that's where the failures hide. Thalira removed her hand from the pipe. She looked at the pipe fitter standing in fluorescent light with sealant on his fingers, and she felt the ache behind her sternum sharpen into something precise. "Thank you for showing me," she said. "Thank you for looking." She returned to the Accord chamber. The next 12 hours were a siege. Lord Korith demanded a private audience. Thalira granted it, because refusing would give him grounds for a procedural complaint. He stood on the far side of the obsidian table and spoke for 11 minutes about the indignity of placing a human laborer on the same registry as 3 lords of approved lineage. He used the word contamination 4 times. He used the word standard 6 times. He did not use the word choice at all. Thalira listened. She had trained herself to listen without reaction, the way her mother had listened to the conclave's elders during territorial disputes. Spine straight, hands folded, face composed, eyes tracking the speaker the way a raptor tracks movement. "My terms remain the most generous," Korith concluded. "The human is a distraction. Dismiss his petition and accept my contract before this spectacle damages your house's reputation further." "Thank you, Lord Korith. I will consider your advice." "That is not advice, Princess. It is a warning." "Then I will consider your warning." He left, the door closed harder than necessary. Warlord Davin's response was simpler. He sent a message through Drellas. "Tell the princess that I respect her strategy, but if she bonds with the human, my offer of military protection becomes irrelevant, and the Third House's border territories will face their next incursion without my fleet at their back." It was not a threat. It was a forecast, and it was accurate. Without Davin's military alliance, the Third House's borders were vulnerable. Thalira's father had maintained those borders through a combination of diplomacy and the implied threat of Davin's fleet, an arrangement that had never been formalized because Sovereign Rael had been too shrewd to give Davin leverage. Now Davin was making the leverage explicit. Emissary Bryn said nothing. He sent no message. He made no demand. He simply filed an amended contract with the Protocol Regent, this 149 pages, with 2 new clauses governing the princess's interactions with non-Galtharian species during official functions. The message was clear. If she was going to consider a human, Bryn would ensure that any future human contact was contractually controlled. Thalira read all 3 responses in her private study, a small room behind the Accord Chamber with walls of dark wood and a single window overlooking the city's western spires. The sun was setting, and the light that came through the glass was the deep amber of a Galtharian dusk, thick and slow, painting the room in tones of honey and shadow. She pressed her fingertips to the window glass and felt the cold. 3 contracts that would save her house and bury her inside it. 1 petition from a pipe fitter who had asked what she needed. Duty said sign. Duty said protect the sisters, preserve the charter, accept the least destructive offer, and spend the rest of her life inside its walls. Duty was everything her father had taught her, and everything her mother had lived and died upholding. Duty was the architecture of the 3rd house itself, the load-bearing structure that kept 9 planetary systems aligned and 42 warships pointed in the right direction. Desire said wait. Desire said the man in the coveralls had looked at her like a person, not a portfolio, and that the ache behind her sternum was something she could not afford and could not dismiss. 52 hours. At the 48-hour mark, the conclave convened for the formal hearing on Cole Mercer's suitor registration. The hearing chamber was larger than the Accord Chamber, a tiered amphitheater of dark stone and suspended light arrays designed to hold the full complement of the Grand Conclave's 26 seated members. It was not full today. 9 members were present, the minimum quorum, and Thalira suspected that the absences were strategic. Several conclave members had financial ties to Lord Korith's family. Others owed favors to the Vathari Compact. Not attending was a way of supporting the challenge without being recorded doing so. Cole Mercer stood at the petitioner's mark, a circle of inlaid bronze at the center of the floor. He wore the same coveralls. He had added nothing to his appearance. No borrowed formal attire. No coached gestures. He stood the way he had stood in the Accord Chamber, feet apart, hands at his sides, steady. Lord Korith's advocate, a senior legal scholar named Valith, presented the challenge. The argument was precise and well constructed. Clause 4 of Statute 11, Valith argued, was intended to accommodate the potential future inclusion of allied Galtharian subhouses, whose lineages had not yet been catalogued at the time of the Accord's drafting. It was never intended to open the registry to non-Galtharian species. The legislative intent was clear. The human's petition was a misapplication of the statute's language. Cole Mercer had no advocate. He spoke for himself. Legislative intent is a guess, he said, his voice carried in the amphitheater without strain. The statute's language is a fact. The language says any individual of sound mind and body. It says no existing statute explicitly bars their species by name. I am an individual. I have a sound mind and body. No statute bars humans by name. The language is clear. Valith pressed, the spirit of the law. The spirit of the law is whatever the people in this room decide it is today, Cole said. The letter of the law is what was written 900 years ago by people who were careful with their words. They listed the requirements. I meet them. If the conclave wants to add a species bar, they can draft one, but they can't apply it retroactively to a petition that was filed under the current statute. The chamber was quiet for a moment that stretched longer than the silence warranted. Conclave member Serles, the eldest seated member, a Galtharian female with deep bronze skin and eyes that had seen 6 sovereign successions, leaned forward. Mr. Mercer, you are a water reclamation specialist employed on Sub-Level 3 of the Diplomatic Annex. You earn a maintenance contractor's wage. You have no military assets, no territorial holdings, no political alliances, and no cultural standing within the Galtharian hierarchy. Why should this conclave take your petition seriously? Because the princess took it seriously, Cole said. She granted me an audience. She heard my words. She asked me what I would offer. That was yesterday. She has not dismissed my petition. Under Statute 11, a petition that has been received by the subject of the accord and not dismissed remains active until the subject dismisses it or the clock expires. The conclave's role is to verify my eligibility under the statute, not to evaluate my worthiness. Worthiness is the princess's decision. Thalira watched from the gallery above, her hands folded in her lap, her face composed. She watched Cole Mercer stand on that bronze circle and speak to 9 of the most powerful people on her planet as though they were colleagues at a planning meeting, and she watched the chamber's energy shift the way atmospheric pressure shifts before a storm. The conclave deliberated for 40 minutes. The ruling was 5-4. The petition stands. The human remains a registered suitor. Lord Korath left the chamber without speaking. His advocate gathered papers in silence. Warlord Davin, who had observed from the military gallery, departed with a look Thalira recognized. Respect, reluctant, for the pipe fitter who had outmaneuvered a senior legal scholar with nothing but the plain text of a 900-year-old law. 46 hours. That evening, Thalira requested a meeting with Cole Mercer in the Annex's maintenance workshop on Sublevel 3. It was a deliberate choice of venue. She wanted to see him in his own space. The workshop was a practical room with practical things in it. Pipes hung from wall mounts. Tools were organized on pegboards with the precision of someone who used them daily and cared for them. A workbench ran the length of the far wall, its surface scarred and stained and clean in the way that a well-used thing is clean. No clutter, no waste, every mark earned. The lighting was industrial fluorescent, and after 6 hours under Verath blossoms and plasma lanterns, the honest white light felt like breathing fresh air. Cole was replacing a valve coupling when she arrived. He finished the joint, set the wrench down, wiped his hands on a rag and looked up. "Princess." "Mr. Mercer." She stood in the doorway. She had changed from formal court attire into simpler clothing, a high-collared tunic of dark green fabric, trousers, low boots. She had left her circlet in her chambers. Without the ornaments of rank, she was aware that she looked like what she was, a tall, tired woman with teal skin and worried eyes. "I came to understand something," she said. "Why did you file the petition, not the legal argument, the real reason?" Cole leaned against the workbench. He considered her the way he considered things, not quickly, not slowly, but with the attention of someone who believed the question deserved an honest answer. 4 months ago, I arrived on Sublevel 3. First day, I found a water main that was scheduled for replacement 18 months out. The corrosion was advanced. I flagged it. Nothing happened. Second week, I found a filtration bypass that was dumping untreated particulate into the residential water supply for the diplomatic quarter. I filed a report with the Annex Engineering Office. They filed it. Third week, I went around the engineering office and fixed the bypass myself, because I couldn't watch people drink water I knew was contaminated and do nothing about it. He paused. 3 days ago, I overheard a conversation in the Annex corridor, 2 diplomatic staffers discussing the accord. They were talking about you the way people talk about a structural problem. Load-bearing capacity, stress tolerances, which alliance would stabilize the most vectors. Nobody in that corridor used your name. They called you the asset. Something in Thalira's throat tightened. "I read the accord that night," Cole continued. "I read the 3 contracts posted in the foyer, and I saw the same thing I saw in the water system. A problem everyone could see, that nobody was willing to fix in a way that didn't serve their own interests. So I looked at the statute, found the clause, and filed. You are comparing my bonding crisis to a corroded pipe. I'm comparing the way people ignore problems to the way people ignore people. The mechanism is the same. If the thing you're looking at doesn't benefit you, You schedule it for 18 months out and let it corrode. Thalira was quiet. The fluorescent light hummed. Somewhere in the walls, water moved through pipes that this man had repaired, and the sound was steady and ongoing in a way that the silence in the Accord chamber never was. "My sister," she said, "Vela is 12, Senna is 9, Rise is 6. If the house charter dissolves, they lose their residential status. They become wards of the Grand Conclave. Do you understand what that means?" I asked around. It means institutional housing, state-appointed guardians, separation from each other if the conclave assigns them to different provincial authorities. "Yes. And you've been carrying that for 11 days. I have been carrying it since my father's heart stopped." Cole nodded, not the performative nod of sympathy, the plain acknowledgement of weight. "Here's what I can offer," he said. "I don't have a fleet, I don't have a bloodline, but if we sign a contract, I will not move your sisters out of their home. I will not tell you what to eat. I will not require you to relocate. I won't take command of your defenses or merge your trade agreements into someone else's portfolio. I will fix what needs fixing, stay out of the way of what doesn't, and make sure the water runs clean. That's all I've got." That is not enough to hold 9 systems. Probably not, but it's enough to hold a family. 40 hours. Thalira returned to her private study and did not sleep. She sat at her desk with the 4 contracts arranged in front of her, Korith's, Daven's, Bryn's, and a single-page document that Cole Mercer had drafted on lined maintenance paper in clear block handwriting and slid across the workbench before she left. The maintenance paper contract read, "I, Cole Mercer, offer a bonding partnership to Princess Thalira Savan under Statute 11. Terms: mutual respect, shared decision-making, no forced relocation of family members, no dietary restrictions, no schedule controls. The princess retains full command of the Third House's military, diplomatic, and territorial operations. I contribute labor, maintenance expertise, and the commitment to stand beside her without conditions. Duration: permanent, renegotiable at her request." It was 7 sentences. Bryn's contract was 49 pages. Thalira read it 4 times. Then she folded it carefully and placed it inside the inner pocket of her tunic, against the fabric over her sternum, and pressed her hand flat against it. She should have slept. Instead, she pulled up the house accounts on her terminal and ran the projections she had been avoiding. Without Daven's fleet, the Third House's border systems were defensible for approximately 14 months using the existing garrison deployments. After that, the Velthari Confederation's territorial patrols would begin probing. Not an invasion, not yet, but pressure, the kind that accumulated like corrosion in a pipe joint until something failed. Without Bryn's trade fleet, the House Treasury operated at a sustainable level for 22 months. After that, the import costs for the outer systems exceeded revenue, and the shortfall would compound. Within 3 years, the outer systems would begin petitioning the Grand Conclave for independent charter status, and the Third House would contract from 9 systems to 5. Without Korith's political alliance, the conclave votes that had historically protected the Third House's territorial integrity would begin to shift. Korith controlled 4 conclave members directly and influenced 6 more. His support had been implied for decades because sovereign Real had been worth cultivating. A Savan princess bonded to a human pipe fitter would not be worth cultivating. Thalira stared at the projections. The numbers were clear. The numbers said that choosing Cole Mercer was choosing a slow diminishment that would take her house from 9 systems to 5 within 5 years, from 5 to 3 within a decade, and eventually to nothing. The numbers said that, and the numbers were probably right. But numbers did not account for the way a 9-year-old girl's face had changed when she described a man who let her hold a wrench. Numbers did not account for the fact that in 72 hours of crisis, only one person in her world had asked her a question instead of delivering a demand. Numbers did not account for the weight of being seen. Thalira closed the terminal. She left the projections on the screen, glowing faintly in the dark study, because she wanted them visible. She wanted to know exactly what she was choosing and exactly what it would cost, so that when she chose, the choice would be clean. 28 hours. The second full day inside the Accord window broke, with a formal reception that Thalira was required to attend. The 3 original suitors were present. Cole Mercer was not invited, but Statute 11's provisional registration meant he had the legal right to attend, and he did. He stood near the back of the reception hall in his clean coveralls among Galtharian nobles in their formal silks and ceremonial armor. He did not attempt to blend in. He did not shrink. He stood with a glass of water he had poured himself from the service table and watched the room with the quiet attention of someone assessing load tolerances. Lord Korath approached Thalira during the reception's first course. His voice was low and precise, calibrated for the ears of those nearby. 62 suitors from approved lineage houses have been bonded under this accord in 7 centuries. Not one was a laborer, not one was alien. You are making a mockery of your father's legacy. My father's legacy, Thalira said, is a house that serves its people, not a house that serves its suitors. Korath's eyes hardened. Your father understood political reality. My father died of a heart that gave out under the weight of political reality, Lord Korath. Do not lecture me about what he understood. Korath withdrew. The exchange had been overheard by enough people to travel through the reception hall like a current through water, and Thalira felt the room's attention recalibrate around her. At the reception's midpoint, an incident occurred that changed the trajectory of the final 24 hours. Senna, Thalira's 9-year-old sister, had slipped away from her guardian and wandered into the reception hall looking for her older sister. She was small for her age, her teal skin a shade lighter than Thalira's, her black copper hair in 2 braids, her dark amber eyes wide with the particular alertness of a child who knows she is somewhere she should not be. She found Thalira at the edge of the hall and tugged her sleeve. Thali, there's a man fixing the water fountain in the east garden. He let me hold the wrench. Thalira looked down at her sister, and something in her face that she had been holding rigid for 11 days cracked by a fraction. Did he? He showed me how the valve works. He said water always finds a way through. Even if you block it, it finds another path. Senna tilted her head. Is he one of the men who wants to marry you? He filed a petition. He's nicer than the other ones. The tall silver one looked at me like I was furniture. Thalira's hand found Senna's shoulder and rested there. Across the hall, she could see Cole Mercer standing by the service table. He was no longer holding his water glass. He was kneeling beside one of the reception hall's decorative floor grates, peering into it with a penlight from his utility belt, his brow furrowed in the specific way of a man who had just noticed something that was not working correctly. He was, she realized, checking the drainage system of the reception hall while attending a formal bonding reception, because that was what he did. He saw systems. He found what was broken, he fixed it. A diplomatic aide named Turvan approached Thalira moments later and informed her, in the careful voice of someone delivering intelligence disguised as small talk, that Lord Korath had spent the past 3 hours in a private communication suite contacting conclave members who had been absent from the first hearing. The word being used in those calls, Turvan said, was crisis. Not the princess's crisis. The conclave's crisis. Korath was framing Cole Mercer's petition as a threat to the institution itself, not merely to one bonding proceeding. If a human pipe fitter could use a 900-year-old loophole to place himself on the approved registry, what was the registry worth? What was the accord worth? What was the entire architecture of Galtharian sovereignty worth, if anyone with the literacy to read a statute could walk through its doors? It was, Thalira recognized, a masterful reframing. Korath had stopped arguing that the human should be rejected. He was arguing that the system should be afraid. She found Cole Mercer in the East Garden 20 minutes later. He was sitting on a stone bench beside the water fountain he had repaired, his hands resting on his knees, looking at the spray of water catching the late afternoon light. He did not look like a man who was afraid of systems. "Korath is building a coalition," she said. "I figured. He is reframing your petition as a systemic threat, not a personal challenge. He wants the conclave to see you as a precedent that would undermine the registry itself." Cole considered this. "That's probably smart." "It is very smart. And if it works, the conclave will remove you at the next hearing regardless of the statute's language, because they will decide that preserving the institution matters more than applying its rules." "That sounds about right. Institutions protect themselves." "You are not concerned." "I'm concerned for you. If they pull my registration and you're back to 3 contracts, the clock doesn't stop. You still have to choose, and you'll have fewer hours to do it." "I am aware." He looked at her. The light from the fountain played across his weathered face, softening the hard lines, and his brown eyes were steady in the way that water is steady when it has found its level and does not need to rush. "Princess, if I asked you one more question, would you answer it honestly?" "That depends on the question." "If the clock weren't running, if there were no accord, no registry, no dissolution threat, if you had all the time in the world and every option available, what would you choose?" Thalira's breath caught in her chest. It was a small sound, nearly silent, and she was grateful for the fountain's noise. She looked at the water. She looked at his hands on his knees, scarred and chemical-stained and still. She looked at the garden walls, ancient stones softened by centuries of climbing vines, and beyond them the spires of the Galtharian capital reaching upward into a sky that was turning the color of copper as the sun dropped. "I would choose to not be asked that question," she said, "because the answer would make the next 20 hours harder than they already are." Cole nodded. He did not press. He did not smile. He simply accepted the answer the way he accepted load-bearing facts, as weight that was real and had to be accounted for. "Fair enough," he said. 20 hours. The formal challenge hearing reconvened at the 16-hour mark. This time it was not Lord Korath who brought the challenge. It was a joint motion filed by all 3 original suitors, arguing that the princess's continued refusal to accept any approved lineage contract constituted a de facto rejection of the accord itself, and that her engagement with the human suitor represented a deliberate attempt to subvert the spirit of Galtharian sovereignty. The motion requested the immediate removal of Cole Mercer from the registry and the mandatory acceptance of the highest-ranking remaining contract, Korath's. The conclave heard arguments for 2 hours. The amphitheater was full this time. All 26 members were present, and the gallery above was packed with diplomatic staff, military observers, and 3 journalists from the Planetary Press Corps who had somehow obtained access credentials. Cole Mercer stood on the bronze circle again. This time, the atmosphere was different. The first hearing had been a procedural exercise. This one was an ambush. Valith, Korath's advocate, presented a comprehensive case. He cited 7 precedents in which the conclave had overridden petitioner rights to preserve the integrity of the accord. He introduced testimony from 3 cultural historians who argued that the accord's framers had explicitly intended to restrict bonding to Galtharian species partnerships. He produced a letter, which Thalira had never seen, from the Protocol Regent's predecessor expressing reservations about Clause 4's potential for abuse. Cole Mercer listened to the entire presentation without interruption. When it was his turn to respond, he did not address the legal arguments. Instead, he said, "I'd like to ask Princess Savon a question." The chamber went silent. Conclave member Serles considered this for a long moment, then inclined her head. Cole looked up at the gallery where Thalira sat. His voice carried clearly. "Princess, in the past 72 hours, have any of the 3 registered suitors asked you what you want?" The chamber waited. Thalira gripped the railing of the gallery. Her knuckles, deep teal, were pale at the joints. She could feel every eye in the amphitheater on her. The protocol regent at her shoulder made a small sound of caution. Duty told her to deflect. Duty told her to maintain composure. Duty told her this was not the time or the place. "No," she said. Her voice was clear and it filled the chamber. "They have not." Cole nodded, then he turned back to the conclave. "I'm not asking to override the accord. I'm not asking to bypass the registry. I'm asking to be an option. Not the only option, not the mandated option. An option. The princess has the right to choose, and right now she's being told her only choices are 3 contracts that treat her like a territory to be annexed. If the conclave removes me from the registry, it's not protecting the accord. It's removing her last option that doesn't come with conditions she's told you she cannot accept." He paused. "I fix water systems for a living. I know what happens when you block every outlet. The pressure doesn't go away. It just finds somewhere else to break." The conclave deliberated for 90 minutes. The vote was 14-12. The petition stands. The 4th suitor remains registered. 12 hours. The next 10 hours passed in a sequence of conversations that Thalira would remember for the rest of her life, with the clarity of images burned into metal. Drella's Vorn in her study. "Princess, if you sign with the human, the military implications are severe. Daven's withdrawal is not a bluff. The border territories will be exposed." "Thalira, I know. And Bryn's trade fleet. Without the Vathari Compact's financial backing, the 3rd House's treasury operates at a deficit within 18 months. "I know. Then you understand that choosing the human is choosing risk." "I understand that choosing anyone is choosing risk. The question is which risks I can live inside." Her sister Vela, 12 years old, tall for her age, standing in the study doorway with the gravity of someone who had been listening through the wall. "Thali, are you going to lose the house?" "Not if I can help it." "The human, is he kind?" "He asked me what I needed." Vela was quiet. "Then nobody else did that?" "No." Cole Mercer, in the maintenance workshop at the 4-hour mark, sitting on his workbench with a cup of coffee that he had made with a portable brewer he kept beside his tools. "You know what happens if you sign with me." "I know." "You lose the military alliance. You lose the trade fleet. You lose the political cover of an approved lineage bond. Your house becomes vulnerable." "I know. And you're still here." "I am still here." He set the coffee down. "I need you to understand that I can't fix this the way I fix a pipe. I can't just replace the corroded part and weld it. This is a political system that is designed to punish you for choosing someone who doesn't look like the people who designed it. And if you choose me, that punishment is going to land on you, not on me." "I am aware." "Are you? Because I've been a maintenance contractor my whole adult life. I've worked on stations, ships, outposts, and annex sublevels where nobody knew my name and nobody cared whether I showed up. If this goes wrong, I go back to fixing pipes. You lose a dynasty." "Mr. Mercer." Thalira's voice was steady, and her amber eyes held his brown ones with a directness that made the fluorescent light seem warmer. "I did not come to Sublevel 3 to find a political solution. I came because you were the only person in 72 hours who asked me what I wanted." 2 hours. The final session of the Accord convened in the original chamber. The Verath blossoms had fully wilted, their petals brown and curled, releasing the last of their ozone compound in a wave that made the air taste of endings. The plasma lanterns were set to their brightest configuration, washing the obsidian table in light so sharp it felt surgical. All 4 suitors were present. Lord Corrith sat rigid, his jade eyes fixed on Thalira with the intensity of a man who had calculated his odds and found them unacceptable. Warlord Davin sat with arms crossed, watching the proceedings with the detachment of someone who had already written his next strategic plan regardless of the outcome. Emissary Bryn held his 49-page contract in a leather folio, his slight hands resting on it with proprietorial calm. Cole Mercer sat in his clean coveralls at the end of the table. His hands were in his lap. He did not have a folio. He did not have a contract. The 7-sentence document on maintenance paper was in Thalira's pocket. Protocol Regent Drellas, Vorn stood and addressed the chamber. The Accord clock registers 2 hours. Princess Thalira Savan, unbonded, has received 4 registered petitions. Under Statute 6, the princess must declare her selection or the clock will expire and the 3rd Sovereign House Charter will dissolve. Princess, do you wish to make a declaration? Thalira stood. Her chair scraped back on the stone floor with a sound that echoed in the chamber's high ceiling. She looked at Lord Corrith. Lord Corrith, your terms would have given my house military strength and my sister's stability. But your contract does not mention my name once in 14 pages. It refers to me as the bonded consort. I am not a title. I am a person. She looked at Warlord Davin. Warlord Davin, your fleet would have protected my borders, but your terms require me to surrender command of my own defenses. You are offering to guard my house by taking the keys to every door. She looked at Emissary Bryn. Emissary Bryn, your financial resources could have stabilized the 3rd house for a generation, but your contract includes a clause that governs how many minutes I may spend in unscheduled conversation with non-Galtharian individuals. You are not offering a partnership. You are offering a leash measured in minutes. The chamber was silent. In the past 72 hours, Thalira continued, I have been told what I am worth by 3 men who have never asked me what I value. I have been shown contracts that account for every aspect of my life except the fact that I am living it. I have been warned that choosing differently is a political provocation, a cultural contamination, and a betrayal of my father's legacy. She paused. Her hands, which had been folded at her waist, moved apart and she placed them flat on the obsidian table. The cold bit through her palms. My father's legacy is not a charter. It is not a fleet. It is not a territory. My father's legacy is 3 daughters who were taught that duty and dignity are the same thing, and that a Savan does not trade one for the other. She turned to look at Cole Mercer. He was watching her. His brown eyes were steady. His scarred hands rested on his knees. He did not lean forward. He did not smile. He waited the way water waits behind a valve, knowing its nature, patient with its direction. Mr. Mercer, your petition contains 7 sentences. It offers no fleet, no territory, no political alliance. It offers labor, presence, and a commitment to stand beside me without conditions. In the 900 years of this Accord's history, no suitor has ever offered less. And no suitor has ever offered more. She reached into the inner pocket of her tunic and produced the folded sheet of maintenance paper. She unfolded it carefully and placed it on the obsidian table. I accept. The word landed in the chamber like a bell struck once in a cathedral. Lord Corrith rose from his chair. His face was the color of old marble, and his jaw worked around words that he ultimately did not release. He gathered his formal robes and walked to the door, and his advocate followed, and neither of them looked back. Warlord Davin uncrossed his arms, studied Thalira for a long moment, then inclined his head a fraction of a degree. It was not approval. It was the acknowledgement of a flanking maneuver he had not anticipated, delivered by a person whose capability he had underestimated. Emissary Bryn closed his leather folio with a soft click, rose, and said, I will inform the compact. He left without inflection, without anger, without anything except the perfect neutrality of a man already calculating his next position. The chamber emptied. Drella's Vorn sealed the contract with the Protocol Regent's official cipher, and the Accord clock stopped at 1 hour and 47 minutes remaining. Thalira and Cole Mercer stood on opposite sides of the obsidian table. The Verath blossoms above them were finished. The ozone taste was fading. The plasma lanterns had shifted to their evening configuration, casting long amber light across the room. "You should know," Thalira said, "that the next 12 months will be the hardest the Third House has faced in a century. Davin will withdraw his fleet. Bryn will adjust the Compact's trade terms. Korath will petition the Conclave to review the Accord for future amendments. We will be undermined at every junction." "I know. You are not bothered. I've spent my whole career in places where nobody wanted me and the infrastructure was falling apart. This is the same work, bigger pipes." Something crossed Thalira's face. It was not a smile. It was the beginning of one held at the edge, acknowledged but not released. Her amber eyes, which had been the only part of her that showed anything in 72 hours of negotiations, showed it now. Not gratitude, not relief, not romance. Recognition. The same recognition she had seen in Cole Mercer's eyes the first time he walked into her chamber. The look of someone who sees the person in front of them and decides, without fanfare, without conditions, to stay. "Mr. Mercer." "Cole." "Cole, my sisters will want to meet you properly. Senna already showed me how the East Garden valve works. She's got good hands." "She has her mother's hands." "Then her mother must have been someone worth knowing." Thalira's composure held. It held the way a dam holds when the pressure behind it has finally equalized. Not through resistance, but through the absence of anything left to resist. She was not going to cry. She was not going to collapse. She was going to stand in this chamber where her house had been at stake, where every powerful male in her world had looked at her and seen a transaction. And she was going to look at the pipe fitter in the maintenance coveralls who had asked her what she needed. And she was going to let the recognition settle into her bones like warmth returning to hands that had been cold for a very long time. "Come," she said. "There is work to do." Cole Mercer picked up the folded maintenance paper from the obsidian table, tucked it into the breast pocket of his coveralls beside his penlight and his chemical-stained rag, and followed the princess of the Third Sovereign House out of the Accord chamber and into whatever came next. Behind them, the last Verath blossom released its final breath of burnt sugar and old copper, and the clock that had been counting down for 72 hours went dark.